I've been pretty critical of the RNC the last two election cycles, 2022 and 2020. They probably deserved criticism before that. But the reason that I've been so critical is because the Democrats out-electioneered us in 2020 and 2022 with their universal mail-in ballots, their drop boxes, their ballot harvesting, their get out the votes, their targeted recruitment of voters. And I understand that as Republicans, we don't like those things. We don't want election season. We want election day. But the fact of the matter is right now we have election season and we haven't been competing. And the RNC hasn't seemed to grasp that concept that we have to invest in that sort of infrastructure to actually compete with Democrats. Otherwise, we're not using the rules at our disposal to win elections. Give me your analysis of this. Why aren't they taking better action so that we actually have a chance, especially when we have public opinion in our favor on so many of these pivotal issues right now?
Well, I think you've seen the RNC definitely get the message. They announced this initiative called Bank Your Vote, where they're trying to get everybody to go out early, bank your votes. Because what happens is you may not like early voting, you may not want to early vote, but when you do it, you relieve the financial burden from the campaign of the RNC. Meaning, if I know that Liz Wheeler still has to vote 2 weeks out, I'm going to keep calling her. I'm going to keep knocking on her door. I'm going to keep sending her direct mail, communicating with her. And that costs money. And so if you are what we call a high propensity voter, in other words, someone we know should be voting and you haven't, it's going to cost you money. And so the RNC has really, in this current cycle, initiated this idea of getting people to say, when it comes time for election day, bank your vote so that we don't have to spend money and resources going after you. We can go after somebody else who is lower on the totem pole, if you will say, of reliability. I think part of this, look, for a while, the RNC led the way on this in terms of early voting. Then there was a lot of disagreement within the party itself about whether to support early voting, whether or not we were embracing something that was fraudulent. As you know, there was a commission that deemed so many of the aspects of early voting as unsecure, unsafe, and vulnerable to fraud. And so there were a lot of people in the hierarchy that said we shouldn't be supporting this. It took a couple cycles of saying, great, you know what? It may suck, but it's the new rule. It's the game. And the Democrats are beating it as that is either we go along to get along. We cannot like ballot harvesting. We can agree that it's horrible and a bad thing and that the unions and the left do this thing and basically scare people into giving them their ballot. But at the end of the day, in several states, it's the law. And so we can complain about it and then they'll just run circles around us and take over all the offices, or we can play by their rules. And I think that everybody is slowly catching up to that you're not going to change it now. I hate to tell everybody, and I'm with you. I like voting on election day. Every state in the union allowed for absentee ballots. If you were sick, if you were in the military, if you had a work requirement, that there was no issue. This is a completely manufactured problem created by the left to allow them to implement these kind of tactics. And we sat back in a lot of cases and let it happen. And now we're dealing with the consequences.